World War II is often remembered in stark contrasts: good versus evil, heroes versus monsters. But history, in its messy complexity, is rarely so simple. Buried beneath the grand narratives of ideologies and armies are the stories of individuals, ordinary people forced to make impossible choices in extraordinary times. This is one such story, a tale that defies every assumption about Nazi Germany, about the nature of warfare, and about the capacity for human conscience to flourish even in the most barren soil. It is the story of a young German lieutenant, a wounded American soldier, and a single act of compassion that would cost one man his life and earn him a unique place in history. This is not a story that glorifies war, but one that illuminates the profound, enduring power of our shared humanity. It is the story of Lieutenant Friedrich Lengfeld, the only German soldier of World War II to be honored with a monument erected by his former American enemies. From September 1944 to February 1945, a dark, damp stretch of woodland along the German-Belgian border became a meat grinder for the American Army. The Hürtgen Forest, a 50-square-mile tract of dense fir trees, steep ravines, and muddy trails, was a nightmare for any attacking force. Visibility dropped to mere yards. Every tree could conceal a sniper, every path could be booby-trapped, and every clearing was pre-sighted for mortar and artillery fire. The battle consumed lives at a horrifying rate, costing the U.S. forces approximately 33,000 casualties and the Germans around 28,000. It was a battle of attrition where gains were measured in yards and paid for in blood. Into this cauldron of misery arrived Lieutenant Friedrich Lengfeld in late 1944. At 23 years old, he was the company commander of the 2nd Company, Fusilier Battalion of the 275th Infantry Division. Lengfeld was part of a generation caught between worlds. Too young to have chosen his path before the Nazis' rise to power, yet old enough to understand the moral weight of his choices. Survivors from his unit would later describe him as a disciplined but compassionate leader, known for treating his men with a consideration that was not always common in the Wehrmacht. He was a soldier, but he had not lost his humanity. The morning of November 12, 1944, was typical for the Hürtgen: cold, damp, and shrouded in a dense fog. For the men of both sides, the day began with the familiar, grim routine of survival. Then, a new sound pierced the stillness. A voice, weak but persistent, calling out in English from a deadly no-man's land between the lines. The voice came from the wild sow, wild boar, minefield, a treacherous area laced with German anti-personnel and anti-tank mines. An American soldier, severely wounded by a mine and separated from his unit, was crying out for help. His pleas for "help me" and "medic" carried through the skeletal trees, a haunting soundtrack to the war's brutality. Military records from the U.S. 22nd Infantry Regiment confirm that American forces heard the cries and attempted rescue missions, but the combination of the dense minefield and German defensive positions made any approach suicidal. As the hours bled away, the soldier's voice grew weaker, but it never fell completely silent. The sound became a psychological torment for everyone within earshot, a constant reminder of a shared, helpless agony. On the German side, Lieutenant Lengfeld heard it too. His first act, as documented by his men, was one of quiet defiance. He gave a clear order. Under no circumstances were his soldiers to fire upon any American medics who might attempt a rescue. This order directly violated German defensive doctrine, which called for engaging any enemy personnel in the combat zone. Yet, his men obeyed, creating an unspoken, temporary truce around the wounded man. But no American rescue came. The strategic situation and the lethal density of the minefield made it impossible. As daylight faded and the bitter November cold set in, the Americans' cries continued, a desperate, fading signal in the gathering dark. For Lengfeld, the passing hours became a profound moral crisis. The strategic imperatives were clear. Any movement through the wild Sow minefield would be incredibly dangerous and could reveal safe paths to the enemy, compromising the entire German defensive position. Military doctrine, common sense, and the imperative of unit preservation all argued for one course of action: do nothing. But another imperative, a deeper, human one, was pulling at him. The sound of a fellow human being suffering, regardless of the uniform he wore, was becoming unbearable. As evening approached, Lengfeld made his decision. According to eyewitness accounts, most notably from his communications runner, Hubert Geiskopf, Lengfeld gathered a few trusted volunteers and announced his intention to venture into the minefield to rescue the American. His men, understanding the suicidal nature of the mission, tried to dissuade him. The Wild Sow was named for its unpredictable and deadly nature. Navigating it in daylight was hazardous. Attempting it in near darkness, while searching for a wounded man, was a recipe for disaster. But Lengfeld would not be swayed. He had studied captured American mine detection equipment and had requested additional medical training. He assembled a medical kit, gathering precious morphine and bandages from his unit's depleted supplies. He was not planning a symbolic gesture. He was preparing for a genuine rescue. What happened next in the dark, fog-shrouded minefield has been pieced together from post-war testimonies and military investigations. Accompanied by his volunteers, Lengfeld began a painstakingly slow and methodical search through the deadly terrain. Using improvised probes and their intimate knowledge of German mining techniques, they advanced step by careful step, listening for the weakening calls of the wounded soldier. American observation posts reported unusual movement in the German lines that evening. A small patrol moving with deliberate care through the minefield, not with tactical intent, but with a purpose the observers could not decipher. The irony was profound. Here was a German officer, an instrument of the Nazi war machine, risking everything to save a man his government declared a subhuman enemy. He was navigating a field designed to kill Americans, using skills taught to him by the Wehrmacht to perform an act of pure humanity. The German rescue party eventually found the wounded American, but they were too late. The soldier had succumbed to his wounds, the cold, and blood loss. The tragedy, however, was not yet complete. As Lengfeld and his men attempted to retrieve the American's body, disaster struck. A hidden S-mine, known to Allied soldiers as a bouncing Betty, detonated. The explosion was lethal. Shrapnel ripped into Lengfeld, mortally wounding him. He was pulled back to German lines by his men, but his injuries were too severe. Lieutenant Friedrich Lengfeld died later that morning, on November 13, 1944. He was 23 years old. The morning revealed the grim scene to American patrols. The bodies of the dead American soldier and several Germans, including an officer, scattered in the minefield. Initially, U.S. intelligence suspected a deception, perhaps a failed German reconnaissance mission. But as soldiers on both sides began to talk, the true story emerged. The impact was immediate and profound. Word spread through the American lines that a German officer had died trying to save one of their own. It was a concept that challenged the very foundation of their understanding of the enemy. As Staff Sergeant Robert Henderson of the 4th Infantry Division later recalled, it changed how some of us thought about the war, about who we were fighting. Within the German ranks, The official response was conflicted. His superiors initially considered his actions a dereliction of duty that had compromised their defensive line. Only the steadfast testimony of his men, who praised his character and leadership, prevented a posthumous reprimand. For decades, the story persisted as a piece of battlefield folklore, a whispered legend of the Hürtgen Forest. But it refused to be forgotten. In the 1980s, American veterans of the 22nd Infantry Regiment, who had fought in the Hürtgen, began a mission to verify the story they had never forgotten. Their research, conducted in collaboration with German military historians, confirmed the extraordinary details of Lengfeld's sacrifice. Driven by a sense of honor and reconciliation, these U.S. veterans took an unprecedented step. They decided to erect a monument to Lieutenant Lengfeld. After navigating bureaucratic hurdles and debates on both sides, their vision became a reality. On October 7, 1994, 50 years after the battle, a simple, dignified monument was dedicated at the Hürtgen Forest War Cemetery. American and German veterans stood side by side at the ceremony. The inscription on the memorial, chosen by the American veterans, speaks volumes. No man hath greater love than he who layeth down his life for his enemy. It is the only known monument erected by American veterans to honor a specific German soldier of World War II. The story of Friedrich Lengfeld does not erase the horrors of the Nazi regime or the complicity of the German military machine. It exists within that darkness, a single, bright point of light that makes the surrounding blackness all the more visible. His story is a powerful testament to a profound truth. Even within the most coercive and brutal of systems, the individual capacity for moral choice can never be entirely extinguished. It is a story that complicates our simple narratives and forces us to confront the messy, beautiful, and sometimes tragic reality of human nature. Lieutenant Lengfeld's monument is not just a memorial to one man. It is a permanent symbol of the conscience that can transcend hatred, the humanity that can override ideology, and the hope that even in the heart of war, love for a fellow human can still, defiantly, find a way.